you don't feel like you're on that path, you're like, where do I even begin? Well, I would begin with finding those people that are like that.
Welcome to the Dr. Fit Jen Show, where we teach ordinary people how to do extraordinary things. We're going to talk about fitness and food, family, finances, faith, and fun. Welcome to life.
Welcome to the Dr. Fit Jen episode number. I have no idea. Today, I'm super excited. I have with me an amazing guest. Hello. Hi. It's Dr. Magan Walker. Dr. Magan Walker is, I am privileged to know her. She is a very successful businesswoman. She is a woman of faith. She has an amazing family, and just honestly, like, is just a really amazing person to know. And I have the privilege of knowing her. She's also my sister-in-law. She happens to be my gym bestie, my workout partner, and for better, she took me to the victory at the Masters Fitness Collective in Indiana just a few weeks ago, and we share between us 6 kids, 8 dogs.
Yes.
And
a lot
of sheep.
Yeah.
2 rabbits, I hear.
Two
now.
rabbits.
2
yes,
rabbits.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Horses, cattle. It keeps growing.
Yes.
But not the kids. We're done with the kids. They keep growing.
Yeah.
But thank the Lord. So I wanted to, I don't have a title for this yet. I figured we would talk and then the title would come up as we go along. But I wanted to hear, like, when our families, the way that you grew up is really like an enigma. Mm-hmm. Like, it is almost unheard of these days.
Right.
So Dr. Magan has a brother and a sister. Mm-hmm. They grew up in a family that, correct me if I'm wrong, you've never had a medication.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Your sister and your brother have never had a medication.
Yep.
Ever in your life, never had a vaccine.
Correct. Yep.
You're not dead.
Nope.
You're still
thriving.
alive.
In fact,
Thriving.
Yeah. Quite the opposite.
I can say the same for her children and my children. You look at them and they are just, like she said, just thriving examples of health. And so, I was thinking about when I'm going to go backtrack just a little bit because I want to make sure that I say this. There are all kinds of influencers, on TikTok, on Instagram, social media, YouTube. Everybody in today's world, we follow the millionaires, we follow the good-looking people, we follow all the things of this.
Fit.
Yeah, super fit. All the things of this world, and I want to follow someone that has peace, that has joy, and that has purpose. And this lady right here does all those things. And I just kind of want, like, to have people, like, understand, like, how does that happen? Mm-hmm. What is it, like, are you part of a cult? Like, did you grow up, because people are like, oh, they're so strange. But, it gets so, like, oh, they don't have any vaccines, or, oh, they don't do this, they don't do this. I'm like, well, okay, yeah, maybe it's weird in today's society, but do you want to be sick and do you want to be like the rest of society? Or look at this family, look at this amazing individual who is thriving in business, in her family life, in her personal life, all these things. Do you want to follow that? And so that's where my heart is. It's like, I want people to understand, like, number one, the health aspect. Where does that come from?
Right.
Is it genetics? What is that? And I know you'll explain that here in just a second. And just kind of like diving into that.
Yeah. So obviously we were very strict growing up, but from, in our spiritual world and how we were raised in church, but then also, I was saying how, things of health, like we never got vaccinated, never got immunized, didn't even have a medicine cabinet growing up. So, never went to the doctor, pediatrician, thankfully never needed it. But it was very unique for sure growing up. And even back then, 30, 40 years ago, like it was very, my friends would look at it and, make comments here and there, but we went to my dad's office to get adjusted a couple times a week before school. So we were always late getting to school. But it's one of those things, now looking back, it was very strategic on my parents' part and very principled in their mindset and in their way of life that I can appreciate way more now, now that I'm older and, we're raising our family, just with those principles and the focus, I think, and just the disciplines that didn't waver.
So I should backtrack a little bit. Your dad is a chiropractor.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Your uncle is a chiropractor.
Yep.
You've got several
Multiple.
cousins
Yeah.
that are chiropractors, and so really became a chiropractic family.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Do you think how does that play a role? How does chiropractic play a role in?
I think it was just, for us, it was just a way of life. So, whether it's before school activities, like I said, we went up to get adjusted. In fact, I remember when we were at driving age, carloads, we would grab carloads of kids that would go up to get adjusted. My dad always write us a note. We would go to, breakfast on the way there. And so the principal knew, it's Tuesday, they're going to get adjusted. But then it was also like, I don't know, like, carloads of people, would come. We had Monday night Bible study. So, when we were in high school, I remember, on the table that we have dinner around every Tuesday, it would extend, we would order pizza and, people that never go to church, our friends and even acquaintances at the time were just like, hey, anyone's invited. So I think it was, I forget the question, but I just remember like, it was just unwavering and just those things that I think, I don't know, I can definitely appreciate, and even, I cannot thank my parents enough now, just setting up those, really the bedrock foundation when it comes to faith, when it comes to things of health, but also on the flip side too. I mean, we also, most of my immediate family, of course, like you mentioned, are chiropractors or, part of the chiropractic world, but then also there's a good portion of them that are in the medical world too. So we always had a very healthy respect for our scope. And they get adjusted and they understand, our mindset, but it's still, it's just a different philosophy. But I remember, our family vacations were chiropractic seminars, and we would meet other chiropractic families that were raised with that mindset and that principled way of living.
So let's talk about that then, because a lot of listeners don't know, what is chiropractic mindset? How is that different from the medical? Because when you say like you never went to the doctor, mm-hmm. well, because your dad was the doctor, right? But and I said, it's not your genes that make you, so healthy, it's largely your environment. Mm-hmm. So, what is it about chiropractic that helped you and your entire family? Mm-hmm. It's not like, hey, yeah, we are just a cult. We just never go to the doctor. If, you have a fever, we pray over you and say good luck, like whatever. Obviously we know like an emergency, you would have to go. Thank God I didn't have to go to, right. I had very few emergencies, right. But explain that a little bit.
So, we've all heard it, genes load the gun and your lifestyle pulls the trigger, right? So definitely your genes play a part, but as you mentioned, it's not everything. It's not necessarily, how your life necessarily has to turn out. So when we talk about the chiropractic lifestyle, it's all about above, down, inside out. So healing happens from the brain down to every organ and tissue cell, above, down, inside out to every, distal part of your body. And so also healing, we understand, comes from God and, his power that he created within us to heal us and, of any sickness, any disease, but then also how do we thrive and how do we reach that potential that he created within us? So it's living out a lifestyle that aids in that, or I should say, doesn't interfere with the way he created us, I guess. So a medication would interfere with what your body's trying to do, for example. So when I say we never had a medicine cabinet, because my dad always taught us the principle at a very early age, and we mimic that to our children too, and every single one of our patients, that we move the bone, God does the healing. So there's nothing your body can't overcome and heal from if it's working the way it's created to. We just have to remove interference, and we do that chiropractically through an adjustment. Then also, you do that through nutrition and removing interference in your diet, and removing interference maybe in your mindset, removing interference, like you were talking about, like worldly stuff that gets cluttered in our priorities, gets cluttered in our, spiritual walk, all of that. So interference, so you can really fully live out your best potential the way we're created to.
Yeah, that's well put. Just like in living in respect to the innate intelligence that God
100%
already put inside of you. And then, so your parents, I love and respect them for that. And to this day, they're still intentional about that. And they were intentional in raising you and your siblings in that manner, in respect to innate intelligence. So that and how God created you. So faith, making sure that was a large part of your life. The health perspective, the nutrition aspect, like you said, the community aspect too, because that's what life is about, is your love and service towards others, and showing the love of Christ. They were very intentional, and I think it was passed down. What did it look like, and what does it look like now? Like if you were sick, you talked about, respect to what your body's doing, and just, removing the interference, kind of like, and not giving a medication because that hinders,
right?
Because the body is expressing a symptom, and so we respect that and say, okay, the body's expressing the symptom. How do we support that, right? So what would happen if y'all were sick?
I mean, I think it was normal, but like when we were, let's say we would have an earache, my mom's Hungarian, so she always had these like home remedies, but to this day, I hear patients still do the same thing, but so my dad always, first of all, would always get us adjusted, multiple times, like if we had a fever or we weren't, throwing up or whatever. So he would check us, let us take a nap, check us. Doesn't always mean adjust, but just make sure we're holding our adjustment so your body can do its thing as quickly as possible, get over whatever it needs to get over. But I mean, like my mom would be like, get us adjusted. Dad would get us adjusted. My mom would squeeze garlic in her ear or something. So like, take a bath, rest. So, I mean, that's pretty much what we do now, remove interference. There's nothing that your body can't get over. And so it's, really no different now than it was back then. When it's just, you do minimal, you do the necessary, but you also still do the minimal, and your body will do its job.
And, what's cool is like you grew up that way. Most people have no clue. They don't, there is science to support that, right? Because, I share with my patients the immunity studies, you do an adjustment, it increases immune function. There's direct correlation to the nerve system and its influence over your immune function.
Absolutely, yeah.
So many studies out there, but they're suppressed because, we try to suppress that symptom that the body's trying to express. For example, giving a child aspirin to break a fever.
Right.
Well, at this point, a lot of people actually still do it, which floors me, but they've been taught no different. Right. So, you the fever is an expression of the body's trying to garner up,
kill off whatever it needs
its
to.
forces, exactly, raising its temperature to kill whatever's
Right.
causing it. And so if we put the aspirin in there or the Tylenol and we now lower that fever, well, we've just hindered the body's
Yeah.
what it's trying to do.
Right.
So what do you do with your kids when it comes to like, which I think is hard in some aspects, when you're bombarded with the world. What do you do with your kids as far as like lifestyle? What do I want to say? The world comes at them. They're in school. Eat something as simple as lunch. Right. So we're talking about helping your kids to thrive in the environment and the way that God created to them. So there's Pop-Tarts, there's cheese puffs, there's candy, there's all these things, and even the school lunches and the school breakfasts, that are like
Junk,
cringe worthy.
gross.
How do you find that balance? Like what do you tell your kids? I know your kids, they don't hate you because you told them no. You can't have this junk. What is that balance for your family, and how do you approach that?
I mean, life's all about balance, right? I mean, we certainly don't live the perfect lifestyle, but I mean, I can influence from the outside creep in. So my kids, they were born at home and, again, kind of living that whole
You're a cult.
Yeah, we are a cult. Oh my gosh, don't drink the water. But like, they live basically I see them at like the perfect life, right? We protect them, we educate them at a very early age. But, we were literally this week sitting in the school line and dropping our youngest two off, which are 9 and 7. And Evie, my 7-year-old, a comment was made, something about like they were taking health and something about the fact that like, I don't know, I don't remember the exact statement, but it was something about medications. And Evie, my 7-year-old, was like, well, some people need medications. And so we had that whole conversation because she knows, like, Evie, like poison's bad, right? So it might get rid of a symptom, but it doesn't ever do anything good long-term, right? So, and she knows this. And so she's never had a medication. So, but even just the chatter that she hears at 7 and what they're teaching in the school, like, my own daughter said, some people need medications. So, and I'm not here to debate whether you need a drug or not. My point is, how very easily it infiltrates our mindset. And especially if I wasn't there then to educate her on why, drugs are bad, pushed or prescribed. How very easily people can get wrapped up in worldly way of thinking. That just is 100% false and misguided, really. So it's very, and you said something about cheese balls. It's funny because my son, the 9-year-old that was there, he, there was a certain grandma in town and and he snuck cheese balls on the grocery list, and my babysitter went to the grocery, got cheese balls, and I'm like, big old tub. And I said, Jen, like, what is this? And she's like, and Tegan then was like, I put cheese balls on there. And she's like, it didn't even register that I would not actually put cheese balls on the grocery list, but Tegan snuck them in. And I was like, oh my gosh, you one up to me. So my kids have had cheese balls, but they never had a Happy Meal. So I call that balance.
So what do they say? Like, because they're, do they ever give you pushback? Like, why do we have to eat this? Or I feel like they have a really good understanding of, I mean, they're really good eaters, I feel like, for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, they have vegetables of choice and, not every kid loves every vegetable I put on their plate, but for the most part, like that, no, it's not, if they get we have ice cream. We have, cakes. We occasionally make brownies, but it's usually more paleo minded. So it's not like we never have junk in our house. So they have a healthy respect for, we don't put poison in our body on a regular basis. So this is something, and in fact, when we were out of town at our competition, they always love when dad gets to babysit them because he's a little bit more lenient on that. And so that's kind of like their vacation when I'm not there watching them and making their meals and, yeah, exactly. So they love it. But I mean, yeah, they have a respect, but I mean, the kids are kids too. So once they taste the, the sugar and the junk, then.
But I think because you've done a good job at explaining to them, like, not just like, oh, this is bad, this is good, but
explaining why.
Yeah, here's why, we eat these foods because, again, in respect to how God created your body, you're wanting to live that thriving life, and we make these type of choices.
And it's really interesting that you say that too, going into even this time of year, because I remember last year, everybody in their class was sick and, throwing up and fevers and missing multiple days of school. And I remember even having that conversation with all of my kids back then. I can remember it. When, we always hear the flu season. Well, it's not a season. It's the time that you pay less attention to what you're putting in your body. You're housed up in the, house. It's cold. You're not getting your vitamin D. You're typically not exercising as much. So, even back then, we were really diligent with, hey, this is time where you got to watch the amount of sugar that you put in your body. And so it's very easy for them to understand that. And when they see it around them and they're realizing, we're the ones that aren't getting sick. It's really cool to see that. So I guess my point is even at an early age, like what you teach, they listen and it makes sense. It's logical. And that goes the same for us too. So what you allow in your sphere of influence really does impact your decisions and your ability or your willingness to learn and maybe even pivot a little bit in your lifestyle that, will maybe yield a different result than maybe what you've been getting up to this point.
Yeah, that's so good. I don't remember what I was reading. I read a lot of stuff, but in respect to what you're saying about like this time of year, it's like we just got past Halloween, going into Thanksgiving. Somebody had written like, okay, good luck. Remember to all those poor kids that have been, hyped up on sugar, getting the food coloring, and now you want them to go sit and concentrate at school, so it's definitely a good point that people, I think it really kind of goes over their head.
Or they think it maybe doesn't even apply. Like, it makes sense, but maybe it doesn't apply to me. Like, we always tend to think we can get away with stuff.
Yeah.
Where eventually you just can't. It bites you eventually.
Yeah. And one thing too, I love, like, you're way better at this than I am because I don't have a garden. So like your plates, like she'll take pictures of her like plates and her meals. She's really good at that, at staging.
Don't look at my kitchen. Just look at my plate.
But she's always got like these really colorful plates and all these vegetables that come from your garden. And I think that is amazing. Even if you're like in the city, you can just like grow like a little box, when your kids, because what do y'all all go out and your kids help you harvest those things from the garden. And so number one, they're getting amazing nutrition because you're not spraying any crap on the vegetables and things. But number two, it's coming right from the source. So right when it's ripe and most nutrient dense. Right. And they're more apt to eat it because like they see how it grew. And I know as I still get that way, I'm sure you do too. Like when it's time to like harvest it out of the ground, that's like so cool. Yeah. You're like, oh, look what I got,
and they'll just like chomp on the green beans, like just when we're picking them. So it's super cool because you get a healthy respect for hard work, like what it takes to grow, food. And then, I agree. Like they're way more apt to play around with vegetables and eat them when we're in the process of picking it or, preparing it for our food.
And going back to intentionality too, just that aspect of seeing the fruit, literally the fruit of your labor,
Right.
like showing that at an early age. Like a kid, you put in the work, you wait for the season, you water it, you tend to it, you take care of it, and then here is your amazing result, amazing reward. And so they find almost like not a sense of pride, but that satisfaction of like, hey, I did work, and it's helping your kids to just become a productive member of society and those little things like that. And so like people, are like, well, I can't afford like to eat organic. Well, yeah, but you can afford a few seeds, like even if it's just like the tiniest little box,
Right.
It's
or
just
buckets. Like that's the thing.
That's awesome.
Buckets,
Like a little bit of dirt and a little bit of time and effort. Would you rather spend your time and effort with that, or have your kid playing a video game that teaches, like the last podcast I did where I was talking about like how the hits of dopamine become never enough,
Right. Yeah.
when they become addicted to playing games.
I always find like you're so right, and you guys are extremely well as a family, well-rounded with this too. Like teaching your kids to work, and there is in all of us a sense of, like you said, like I'm contributing. There's a sense of a little bit of pride when it comes to, or just like thankfulness or appreciation for when you contributed to that, right? For example, my kids, for Mother's Day, that was my gift, is we all planted the garden. So normally it's just, me, or I'm pulling the weeds, or I'm doing this, but this year we were really intentional, like, you're watering, you're planting, you're pulling the weeds, you're mowing, you're picking, we're canning, and we're making this a family ordeal. And it's not a huge garden. I mean, it's sufficient. There's way better gardens than ours, but it's just like, but do what you can in the season you're in. And so I think you're exactly right. It doesn't have to be, I have 7 raised beds and I have 40 acres and it's you got a couple pots, you got some dirt, for $15 or less, you can really be intentional with what you have available in you're in. If you're in an apartment, if you're sharing, living with your parents, if whatever you're doing. So I think it's just a matter of setting your mind to like, what's the next step that I can do right now, as opposed to, well, I don't have that, so I'm all out. No, it's like, but you have something. And if you're that type of person that wants to maybe have all that one day, will be faithful with what you have now. And then pretty soon you'll see that grow. I mean, that's scriptural. So, I mean, that always works, which is super cool.
Yeah, so true. And I think there's so many levels to, going back to the topic of intentionality, with your kids, with your family. You're teaching them that work ethic. You're teaching them health in the process, or eating nutritiously to fuel their health. And you're spending time with them, right? You don't remember, kids don't remember necessarily the gifts that they got. They don't remember like, hey, let's, I remember when we were watching this episode on this TV. They remember the events. They remember the things that you did together.
Yeah.
And
so true.
That's something I feel you and your husband are really good at as well. Is just that intentionality. You have 4 kids, right? What does that look like relationship wise? I know there's always challenges and struggles,
Sure.
but like I know, like you and Drew always make a point to go out on a date. Almost once a week.
Yeah, we got to wrap this up because it is Thursday night.
It is date night.
It is date night. No, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, when you have, and you guys, I feel like are way busier than us even, but when you have businesses and you have the kids and you have the work and you have the schedules, like it is challenging to make sure that you do spend that quality time. And my husband's way more hard on himself as a parent than maybe I am, which could be a good thing and maybe isn't a good thing as well, because Yeah, I mean, we, as a family, whether it's working on the farm, baling hay, doing stuff with the animals or whatever, it's like we do it as a family for the most part, most chores. But then, it's also making sure that you carve that time out for, okay, so this is work time. And because I remember even too growing up, like, I remember working with my parents. I don't ever remember anything fun. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. But like, we worked. And looking back, I appreciate that now. But I mean, I do remember the fun times. I do remember, Wednesday night always, or no, actually it was back then, it was Thursday nights. We always went to church. Sundays, we always went, so I remember the times, the family times too. But I remember like, them being very like, nope, this is what we do. And I feel like, setting early on when, maybe you're just starting out and your kids are little, or, life is crazy. So, we have teenagers now. So it's making sure like as time gets less with them, there's certain times that we just spend together and being intentional with that. And that's always a challenge. It's always a balance that, every parent feels like they probably could do better at, but it's still, whether we get that family time in every single day or not, it's not because we didn't try or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like we didn't.
You set those boundaries early
sure.
on.
Yeah.
And like, the family meal, that's an important thing. You still do that. You and I didn't mention this, but you work at a separate practice full time. Your husband works at a separate practice full time. You live on a farm. There's always things to do. And I think going back to your parents, like you said that you were always at work with them. How's your relationship with your parents?
Oh, best friends. Yeah.
That's my point. Like, I feel like a lot of people feel like they have to coddle to their kids. Like, oh, I'm going to go to this game and this game, and oh, we got this and we got this, which are all good things,
right?
Sports and things. And still, that was a very big part of my growth was through sports. But there's such an appreciation for having your kids see your mission and see your purpose and bring them along with you on that purpose.
I feel like there's a different sense of maturity too with children, because you're right. Like we worked on the farm with my parents, and I mean, we learned to drive tractors on our own. We were 7 and 8 years old. I was running the skid loader every Thursday. We would haul manure. So like, it's one of those things where we were in charge of a lot at a very early age, but then we also, helped my dad. We went to the office every Saturday. We worked with his front desk girl, Lois, and I still remember I wanted her shoes. She always wore stiletto shoes, and she did. She gave me a pair of her shoes when I was big enough to actually fit into them, and I was like, oh my God, these are my girl crush. So, but I remember like, no matter what aspect of life, my parents brought us along, and you're exactly right. I feel like there's that, I mean, I don't know. You're right when you said that there's that sense of like maturity. Like we see that mission, we see the whys behind it. We didn't understand it maybe growing up, but now, like, I wouldn't change it for anything. But we still had fun too. Like we still had, 3-wheelers and had our friends over, and went to youth group, and we still had a blast growing up. But we were very much, on mission at a very early age, even though we didn't realize it or understand it with my parents and their vision. So,
and I think that you learned a very good work ethic from doing all those things with your family. I mean, y'all didn't even have a TV, so it's not like you were sitting around, except your older sister, she was reading.
Yeah, exactly. She never had the manure part, but she definitely had the cooking.
But that work ethic that comes along, because if you see successful, purpose-minded individuals in life, they don't get that way by sitting on the couch. They don't get that way by happenstance. Opportunities come to those that are prepared, and I think that your parents
brought you along in that manner, and you have an extraordinary work ethic that you brought along to your kids, you know? So, things that people can gain from this, you know, the biggest one is that intentionality. They may not understand it right away, but if you start early, you set those boundaries, and you look at, okay, you know, let's say I want a well-rounded child. You know, I mean, it's not like we're perfect parents by any stretch of the imagination.
Just kidding. No, but we're working on it.
We're working on it. But you know, just going by the principles that God gives to us, biblical principles. But I just think that those are things that maybe even a young parent, or even if you got older kids, it's never too late.
Right.
It's never too late to foster a relationship. It's never too late to start instilling those things in your own life. And I think, you know, your kids look to you, whether you realize it or not. You are a very big role model and example in their lives.
Yeah.
The good and the bad, right?
Right, exactly. And I think of, if I were to sum everything up so far, what we're talking about, I think it's like they were the perfect example of living by example, really, when it comes to, I don't know, like practicing what they preach. And so I feel like my mom is still to this day, like the biggest servant. Doesn't ask for anything. We go around and ask for like, hey, what do you want for Christmas? It's like, well, I would like a spatula. No, that was your mom. But like, I would like a notebook, greeting cards. You're like, Mom, what do you really want? So she's so humble. She doesn't ask for anything. If she gets a couple $100, you know, from a rental, she'll spend it on her grandkids, you know, to have a new dress. So she was like the biggest servant of all, really, when it comes to even, you know, saving, and taught us very early on that, you know, you take 10% out, you know, 50% of what's left, you can, you know, you put in savings, and then, you know, 50% you can spend or put in your piggy bank or whatever, or work, like we're talking about, or faith. The guy's a freaking oak tree, like he does not waver, doesn't move. So I think it's just practicing what you preach. I think is so important, especially now when it's, you know, so easy to be fake, right? And it's so easy to speak out both sides of your mouth. But, you know, that's something where I still, you know, gravitate towards people that are authentic, that are steadfast, that are just consistent. And I think that's the biggest thing with, you know, growing up the way we did, is just very consistent, even keel. You just keep going, but you're going uphill, right? And you're growing in all capacities. So it's so easy to be like, ooh, and life is sometimes like that, seemingly, but your mindset isn't, right? And your actions aren't. So I feel like that's important.
Yeah, and I think that's that you mentioned that. It's a good way. Warwick Schiller, I follow him. He's a really great horse trainer, and he's amazing. But he had this quote that says, "You can't change the people that are around you, but you can change the people that are around you." Yeah. And so I think, you know, going back to what you were just saying, like if you don't feel like you're on that path, you're like, where do I even begin? Well, I would begin with finding those people that are like that, you know, that are the unwavering people, the people that are full of peace, the people that are full of joy. That doesn't mean perfect. There's no perfect person out there, you know, but there are a lot of great people that you can glean off of. Right. There's so much wisdom out there. So I would say that that's the first step. If you're like, where do I even begin? You know, is find those group of people.
You know, I heard it said that you're the sum of the 5 closest people in your life. So, you know, I feel like it's really true. Like you, and that also is scriptural, where you become who you hang out with. And so, you know, I feel like that's, I don't know, I think it's so important, speaking of intentionality, intentionality. I don't know. Is that even a word? Maybe, but it's like, you're exactly right. So if it's business, or if it's, being a great mom, or how do I start eating better, or how do I become a great CrossFit athlete, or how do I become a great entrepreneur, or how do I increase my faith and, have faith that moves mountains, like those types of people, like you just pray for it. You find those opportunities, and you just, like, even if it's people that you follow on social media, it's like, who are you following, and why are you following them, or, who are you hanging out with, and why are you hanging out with them? And so I that's great. And I feel like that's also too, Jen, why you fit in with our family so well too. I felt like from that first nap we took together. I just got to say this. My first encounter with Dr. Jen, she was dating my brother, and she was in town for the weekend or whatever. I don't remember. But she flew in. I was on my lunch break. We took a nap together. And I was just like, man, I really like this girl. This is not awkward at all. Because it was so, we clicked.
We did. I slept with her. I slept with her.
Clothes on, but
And yes, we did wait till marriage.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I definitely want to have you back on for a future date.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, love you.
Love you.
All right, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Fuel, work, grow. That's your call to action. You can follow me on Instagram at drfitjen. That's dr.fitjen, all lowercase, as well as ruggedathlete.us.